My deep appreciation of theater history was instilled in me by Tom Empey, a college mentor to me and hundreds, if not thousands of others. While teaching Greek theater terms, he would grab the fabric of his slacks and say,
"You see these pants? Euripides, Eumenides,"
making light of content that could be considered rather dry and stuffy while still maintaining respect for the art, which is what I want to do with this podcast. For each episode, I invite a guest from the many paths my theater career has taken me down. I give my guests no idea what we'll be talking about, but they know we're going to find an outrageous story about theater history and perhaps get a better understanding about why we're still doing it after all these years. So, welcome to Euripides Eumenides, and I am your host, Aaron Odom.
Apocalypse, I said, why you want to show up now? Just when the heart of my life was getting good. I'll give you one more chance. Walk on out of the door, yeah. Get your ass to getting where the getting is good.
Good morrow, Eumenidites, or goodeen, whichever it may be for you. This is Aaron Odom from Trident Theater, bringing you another episode of Euripides Eumenides, a theater history podcast. So, censorship. Perhaps because it's a prevalent current events topic right now as I record this in fall 2025, or because the appropriateness of content is a frequent issue throughout theater history, or perhaps because I love to dive into issues about when theater is the cause of concern for a community to be exposed to certain types of content, whatever it may be. The topic of censorship never ceases to fail to give me cause to do an episode. The episode you're about to hear is all about that lovely topic and a particular time that censorship became quite extreme. But as I'm finding with most instances of censorship, it rarely seems to have the desired effect. Joining me on this episode is an old friend that I haven't talked to for years, but rather I've seen as a friend on social media that I knew way back when. But since back when, my friend Jason Kirkmeyer has become quite the scholar in the arts in his own right, having taught English and literature at the university level for over 20 years before beginning something of a life of semi-retirement. Anyway, besides being quite the scholar that he has developed into, Jason is still really the amusing character that I knew way back when. So, again, perhaps it was that I needed to discuss censorship with someone I knew could add some fascinating perspective in a time when forced censorship has unfortunately made its presence known in the world again. Jason seemed like just the right person. So, without further ado, here is episode 9 of season 2, Werner Finck and the Nazis. Oh man, this is like a crazy flashback here, Jason, honestly, because we just settled the dust somewhat, but I had our mutual friend Devin Sanchez on the show sometime recently, and I think it was after we finished recording that she let me know, like, man, you really are like the rivalry creator about myself. And I'm like, I thought I tried to, and I'm like, and you and me in high school, it was like, we'd see each other's names on the list of like finals, and we're like, God damn it, he's in there too.
Yeah, but Odom again.
Yeah, but then at the end of the round, I think we were both like, Jesus Christ, he's good. That's so much fun to watch. And you and I are totally different types. So it's like, I can never do the kind of stuff you could do, and you can never do this kind of stuff I could do. So, as I got older, I'm like, geez, man, that was amazing to watch.
It's a good time, man. And
it was a great time.
Nobody ever made me laugh harder. Like, seriously.
I think I've never seen anybody who could make their face redder than you could.
Well, it got hot in there, man.
It did get hot, but yeah. But anyway, since then, you have gotten a master's degree in English literature and romantic literature, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And taught at the college level for like 20 years.
That's
quite an accomplishment. So over your 20 years in teaching, what would you say, like from the beginning to the end, like kids were really actually absorbing out of that, or maybe that they found interesting?
I think one of the problems with teaching at the university or at any university, teaching at a university is problematic because you've got kids that are there to get a job. They're there to
Yeah.
get some kind of dream. They aren't there to get the knowledge that's actually there in front of them.
Right.
They're looking for some sort of myth. And so, one thing that I always took from teaching were those moments when students had that myth deconstructed and they began to see how they got there from where they stood. One of my favorite assignments that I ever did was this field guide to writing in whatever field you think you might be in, where you would go and explore what kind of writing you would do. And they would go and interview people and figure it out. And by the end of it, they would walk into careers having an understanding and a knowledge of that, of whatever stuff they might actually have to do and actually have to talk about, because that's something that never happens in school. It's like all of this esoteric crap and none of the stuff that you actually use. And so having students come back and talk to me years later about most beneficial and useful stuff. And then, I taught provisionally admitted college students too. Also, students that didn't belong in school according to the man.
Yeah.
With bad test scores, low GPAs, all of that stuff. And I see their Facebooks, and some of them are teachers now. And I'm like, I won.
See, there's a part of that where I'm thinking about some of those students who are like, I'm going to teach you about how the spark plugs go into the engine. And as you're thinking about it, I really want you to think specifically about the Montagues and the Capulets and their feud. And
now, you understand the ignition is like a Montague. And the gasoline's kind of like the Capulet. And when they come together, you get that fire and that ignition gets going. I'll tell you what, all them cylinders going to be popping here in a second.
You never know who's going to be on the right side of history, but one of them is going to be right.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, they're going to be running a V8.
Well, yeah, we do our best. Oh, man. Well, that's amazing. And do you mind my asking, like, what did you do, like, your dissertation or final project in?
I wrote my master's thesis on William Blake.
Oh.
And yeah, I wrote about how in his images, he was sort of imagining a kind of revolution of the imagination that in reproducing them recreates that revolution each time. And each time it's reproduced, that revolution gets less and less significant. And so for him, the closer you got to the artistic production, the closer you got to the spirit of it and to the actual revolution that is art.
Yeah.
And for him, you've got all of these scholars that look at him like, I think David Essick wrote a book called William Blake, Prophet Against Empire. And in a lot of ways, what he does is he deconstructs all of these modes, whether they're poetic, whether they're governmental, whether they're social. He deconstructs them and then allows us to imagine a kind of new beginning.
Right.
And he's writing at a time of the French Revolution, of the American Revolution, right after the British Revolution. And so he's considering all of those things. Anyway, that's what I jabbered about.
That's amazing though, because I actually just did an episode on Summer and Smoke by Tennessee Williams and how Alma reads this cutting from a poem by William Blake. And it's almost foreshadowing in a way if you understand William Blake, because it's like she's coming into her own understanding of what sensuality can be. And it's just another spectrum it's another, color on the spectrum of human existence,
Right.
As opposed to, we don't talk about We don't talk about Bruno, you know?
Right.
Well, that's amazing, Jason. And again, just fantastic to see you and talk to you again. I want to move right into the topic of the episode here
All
today
right,
because I finished it this morning and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just on the tip of my tongue. I'm even bothering my older son at breakfast. We're sitting across the table from each other and I'm like, what do you think about this? Because he's actually he wants to go into physical therapy at this point, but he's actually a really insightful kid when you get like a big, meaningful piece of literature in front of him.
That's good.
He just read 1984 for his AP English class, and he cooked on that for weeks. Like he's just like, my God, like, yeah, what do you do when a government is telling you all of the information? I'm like, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm sitting there across from him at breakfast this morning and throwing these ideas, and just across the table, he's just playing Clash Royale. You know,
Of course.
I'm like, okay. So I'm glad I'm talking to somebody.
Sponsors for the podcast yet, by the way?
Clash Royale has not sponsored us yet, but you know, we have a multi-national audience. Anyway, so Jason, I sent you this question earlier this week to kind of mull over, and in the light of today's media culture, I think this is a fairly relevant topic. But I'd like you to give me an example of a peaceful performing arts protest that actually got the attention of its intended target.
I thought about this for a long time, man. And it's a complicated one, right?
Uh-huh.
Because you think about performing arts and you think about who sanctions it and who allows it. And so often performing arts are only sanctioned or allowed by the state.
Right.
By the people that often are the ones that are mastering and controlling all of the speech and communication you're trying to create, right? I think for me, as I was reflecting on it, the most meaningful protest that I ever saw was actually on the campus of the University of Wyoming when I was a freaking sophomore.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
I know you know where I'm going.
Yep.
And it was when an old classmate of mine, Matthew Shepard, was murdered.
Yep.
And Fred Phelps and all of his creepy, crazy, awful people came with their signs saying their awful, terrible things. And Jim Osborne and Romaine Patterson and all of these other amazing, incredible people got up with angel wings and stood in front of them saying, you can have your speech, but our speech will speak louder.
Yeah.
And it did on that day.
Yes, it did.
And I think for me, that is a moment where I saw that work, where like, dude, if you're going to let these people on our campus to have their free speech, then we need to have our free speech too.
Right.
And I thought that was a really powerful moment, especially for young people to stand up and do that. And then say like, my speech matters as much as this old guy. And just because he's old and conservative and, you know, you have to, doesn't mean that his speech is better than ours, especially in this moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the funny thing about free speech is that somebody can say something and that can inspire somebody else to say something in the opposite direction.
Right. And I know that it's an example that is sort of a stretch of performance art. But when I look at it, like a bunch of people standing for hours with angels' wings on in front of people screaming at them, that's postmodern art. That's a postmodern artistic installation.
Well, they had to make the costumes.
Well, so. Amen to that. Amen to that.
And I think if my listeners want to check that out, I think it's adapted to film in the Laramie Project.
Yes.
Which I think HBO turned that into the movie. So I don't know if that's out there anywhere, but you know, go consume that. I think Christina Ricci plays Romaine's part or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that scene with the angel wings, and I was like, wow. I mean, I was always obviously adjacent to that because I did my first 2 years at Casper College, and so I knew a lot of the people that you knew. And on that day, when it was announced, I had people all around me who were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe who would do that to Matthew. I can't believe that."
Yeah.
And I just had to kind of be there like, I've got these big shoulders. You can cry in those if you want.
Yeah.
I feel for you, but this was my favorite thing about that whole movement. When Matthew's funeral was finally held in Casper, I think it was like late March.
Yes, in the snow.
In the snow. And no, it might have been like mid to late fall. Anyway, I just remember hearing that from a friend, hey, the funeral's today. And we're on our way to like a biology class. And I'm going, I bet we could skip today.
Right choice.
Yes, we all drove down there just to see it. And I was like catty corner from the protesters who were in a park across from the church. And I saw them all, like the procession moving in. And I think the casket was obviously already in there and stuff. But I thought it was so funny. Jason, you and I were tempered in Wyoming weather. You know, I mean, there were plenty of kids who, they're like, I don't care what temperature it is. I'm going to wear my basketball shorts to school.
There was always that kid that just didn't wear a coat all winter long. There was always that kid from third grade on, and he never died. He never died.
But I just have to think all of these assholes from Kansas come up here and protest, and they aren't used to that weather. And it was that drippy, slimy snow that gets everywhere. And I just had to think that I'm glad that they had their piece. That's fine, that's their choice, but they must have gone home and had some of the most horrendous colds I'd ever heard of in my life.
And never thought about how that Lord of theirs gave it to them.
No, not once. See, this is proof that what we're doing is right, because the devil made us sick.
Hey, I tell you, I was sin. That was the devil in sin, and I tell you,
if there wasn't a road separating me from that church, I would have been sicker. That's all I'm saying.
I tell you, you get up near that close, sin is catchy.
Sin is catchy, indeed.
It's catchy,
indeed. Well, as we are kind of making light of a very unfortunate situation. I'm going to turn our attention
and my friend Matt, by the way, who I went to grade school with, who was an incredible human being.
Yeah, I heard he had a great sense of humor too. Anyway, on this podcast, I've covered several times throughout history when jesters were a prominent part of an era's social culture and provided more than just entertainment. And they've been all over the world and have been around for literally thousands of years. In the West, however, I think we're all a little more familiar of, the medieval court jester and kind of the years beyond. So, they would mainly be in the service of royalty and there to provide uproarious entertainment and gimmicks at a moment's notice. Like always on call.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I've gained some friends on the podcast. I'm friends with the two hosts of High Tales Through History, and they invited me on the show to share something from the world of theater history. But then they attacked me with the history of the jester. And I was like, oh, this is juicy. But, they weren't always there just because they could make people laugh with jokes and tricks and stuff. There were jesters such as, and I'm not making this name up, Jason, Roland the Farter.
18th century?
I think a little more medieval.
Okay.
But for more on him, please go find my episode 47 entitled Flatulists. Roland was praised for being able to fart on cue, generally only called into service around the holiday season towards the end of the calendar year, and was awarded handsomely for his efforts with a manor house and land.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding.
I will never tell this to a guy. If I ever run into a guy named Scott that I went to high school with, we were on this speech trip, and you know how things get wild on speech trips. We got room together.
Fill in the blank. Yep.
The dude could fart on command. I kid you not. I kid you not. This is not a fiction. It can actually happen.
Scott, please write into the show. We are interested to hear how your life has gone since then.
Yes. And if not, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Only 4 people know who you are.
Scott, could be Scott anybody. That's fine. Now, oftentimes, jesters were selected by courts for having some odd control of their bodies, such as Roland. But oftentimes, people born with particular physicalities would be selected. So a jester could be much shorter or much taller than average, or they might have some very obvious situation they had from birth, like an abnormal birthmark or maybe a hump or something like that, right? So, look at that. We can, that's the jester. Mainly, I think the humor there obviously, unfortunately, came from those in power, being able to look down on someone who they could consider less fortunate than them. And they wouldn't necessarily have to have some sort of physical difference to be mocked. Being from a lower class could be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I've also covered funeral clowns in ancient Rome. On this podcast, they would satirize a recently passed ruler with impressions of the departed as the funeral march proceeded through Rome. For example, like if a ruler was known for throwing elaborate parties or something like that, the clown might follow along in the costume of that ruler and amuse the crowd, saying things like, "Boy, this party's really a bummer. When's it going to pick up?" Stuff like that.
And it's actually sort of a lead on to something they said when those rulers were alive in the streets. Romans used to say when they passed by, like somebody whispered in his ear, "Remember, you're mortal."
Yeah. This is all going to end sometime.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, that would, get the street people who may or may not be upset about the rulers dying. It would get them to look on the ruler a little bit more fondly in passing. If you want to listen to more on that, the whole breakdown of that, go back and listen to my episode 59. But given that example, however, I think we all understand jesters to be more often chosen for their wits. And in many eras, jesters were the only critics allowed in the presence of their liege, as most of their critique came from a place of being funny. So, while being a good joke at the king's expense, the king could also find great wisdom in the jester's ribbing. And sometimes this might change policy, but sometimes it would just be food for thought. However, as I'm sure we can all imagine, rulers sometimes can get somewhat perturbed by the critique, or sometimes the overstepping of a jester or the jester's content.
Yeah.
One famous one I found was the jester Triboulet, who served in the French court of King Francis I. Now, on one hand, most reports state that Triboulet was a very favored member of the court, often providing hilarious distractions, but also equally funny digs and barbs at how the king was handling his kingdom. On one occasion, Triboulet may have stepped a little outside of his lines. I can't remember exactly who it was, but he either slapped the queen or the king on the ass in court.
That'll do her.
Bold.
That'll get someone's attention for sure.
Either way, the king was quite offended. I don't know if it was like, "Girl, you got it going on," whap, or "Hey, man, you got a good one there, whap, good game, good call."
France.
It was France. Anyway, the king was very offended and sentenced Triboulet to execution. Yet, since Triboulet had served so long in the king's service, Francis granted Triboulet to choose the manner of his execution. Here's how Triboulet responded, quote, "Good sire, for Saint Nitouche's and Saint Pansard's sake, patrons of insanity, I choose to die from old age."
Gangster.
Brilliant.
Gangster.
Mic drop.
Yep.
And from my understanding, Triboulet was expelled from court, but went on to live a long and happy life.
I love that.
I know. It's such a great, even if it's not a real story, I'm like, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
That's a great jester's story. I mean, he gets off on a hustle.
Absolutely.
That's the way you do it. I mean, come on.
Let me roll the dice here. Yeah. Now, I'm sure that other jesters face similar predicaments. This was really the only one I could find where it's like, yep, definitely off with his head. But sometimes in comedy, one can cross a line that may or may not have been clearly defined.
Right.
Here's from an op-ed in The Independent. Politicians do not deal in originality. They are confined to speaking in the measured language of policy, to negotiate, to keep voters on their side. Comedians are the thorns in their side. They thrive on disruption. Comedians will look for the cracks in the facade and pounce. End quote.
Amen to that.
Right? Right? And good. Good. In my opinion, good. Like, there should be nothing that is without a level of critique.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I often say that, like, you know, you get people who are like, oh, the critics don't know what they're talking about. And I'm like, take a moment and listen. You know, you can always hear a critique and then later go, oh, that's bullshit. Or I see what they're saying and I see that they're coming from a particular point of view, but I don't agree with it. That is a totally okay thing to say too.
Right. Right.
But I think it's a very responsible thing to have somebody who is a air quotes expert in their field, that we can go, okay, does this thing that we have submitted, does it pass muster? Or is this, honestly, this act of governmental policy, is it 1000% bulletproof? Or are there things here that are going to affect people down the road?
Right. Right.
You know?
I think what we see in the arts is a repetition or a kind of a mirror image of what we would like to see happen in the world. And what we see in art, particularly today, is an art that is struggling with these problems of consumption, of the impossibility of revolution, of only being caught up in sexual politics and the politics of just getting a buck. And so I think what has happened, because art is a reflection of who sponsors it, what we see happening in art today is a step away from a thoughtful consideration of how our expression helps us to form and create ways of maneuvering through the world and understanding our own perspective in it. And without some sort of artistic representation that's earnest about that, we lose our path. And that's why, you know, things like shows like Hamilton are so freaking important, because it is kind of popping that balloon that allows us to sort of glibly move through life, happily and idly consuming whatever we're set to consume.
Right.
And being completely happy with the pap that is fed to us on cable news and YouTube and whatever else, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I say this as a podcaster who has made almost zero money being a podcaster at this point. But, you know, it's formats like this where if I have the equipment and I have the time, I can just put out material. And it doesn't cost me a thing except for, you know, obviously the setup of putting things together. But I mean, on one hand, that's like, it's a great thing, but that also allows for a lot of opinions to get out there.
Right. But I think also one of the things that's happening, we're talking as old heads, dude.
Yeah.
You look at YouTube nowadays and it's freaking kids responding to people watching people do things.
Yeah.
Like we watch people do things. Mm-hmm. And that's like a genre in YouTube.
Yeah.
It's so insane how far away art has gotten from, you know, actual art. When you see, like, you know, I'm a creative. I'm on YouTube all the time. And like, oh, you're a creative. What do you do? I respond to hip hop videos from the early 90s exclusively. Like, come on, dude. Come on. That's not creative.
No, you stopped at the point of inspiration. Like, I watched this thing and either I went, I love this, or I hate this. And for some reason you think that's going out in the world now. my response to this rather than, I will take this and create something that I think is going to fill that void. Or I'm taking this and I'm going to carry on the message of inspiration. Like I had this conversation with my younger son the other day about, how do I say it? Just his musical tastes, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And
that was diplomatic, Dad. That was
very
diplomatic.
diplomatic. Yeah. I had to be like, okay, so, do you like all music? Yeah. Oh, wait, except for country. I'm like, okay, well, what's wrong with country? He's like, it's just, I can't. I'm like, hey, now look, though, there have been country artists that have been very inspirational to a lot of people. Like, I will still throw on Hank Williams, Dolly Parton, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson. I'll throw them on anytime. But kind of like after that, I go, Garth Brooks had a couple. Okay, I'll listen to that. Then I go, okay. But now it's like, you see the Taylor Swift Eras tour, but then you see there's like 15 country bands with shows just as big and filling stadiums, and you're like, what the hell are you people doing?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's their taste. I can't say anything about that. That's their taste. But it was like a really interesting thing. Like, you can't say all country music is bad. It's like, you can't say all hip hop is bad. You can't say all opera is bad. There might be
say all people are bad, right?
Interesting.
You
or certain entire groups of people. I don't know. Yeah. Now, going back to our topic about jesters, I've heard it said that comedians are the philosophers and, air quotes, prophets who existed in more ancient times. They are the critics of society, our modern day comedians. They're pointing out this thing or that thing that might be a little bit off. So, for example, I'm not sure that talking about the quality of airline food or the wait time at the DMV is too much of a scathing and divisive critique on contemporary life, but nonetheless something we can all identify with and go, yeah, that don't work, And again, it's a critique nonetheless.
Right.
Some critics aim a little higher. So I'm going to jump quite a few years ahead in history from the time of jesters and introduce you to a critic who went a little bit above. And I'll just be upfront. There isn't a lot of documented history on this character's upbringing, but mainly what went on during his adult years. So I'm kind of piecing together things a bit based on what I found. Werner Finck was born in Germany in 1902 to a fairly proletarian family. Your eyes got very big at Werner Finck.
I'm super stoked about where this is going, man.
As a youth, Finck attended a school for the arts and gave acting a try. And from his first efforts on stage, it seemed obvious to everybody else around him that he had a talent for comedy. And near the end of his teens, was introduced to the cabaret scene in Germany, which is very popular across Germany. Just see the play Cabaret, particularly in Berlin. Finck was hooked. He began a vaudeville-style act. He had a couple different partners he would do things on stage with, and soon gained some good money and significant popularity. In 1929, he joined with some other German comics and songwriters, and they opened their own club, Die Catacomb, in which...
Oh, nice.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one.
Uh-huh. And he often appeared as the MC for nightly entertainment. By 1933, Adolf Hitler had taken power in Germany and began his vast plan for reshaping Germany after the devastation the country experienced as a result of World War I. While many felt he was taking things in the right direction, not everybody agreed. Finck was one of those objectors and would often address the downsides of Hitler's social, culture, and political movements in his cabaret acts. Quote, his attempts to ridicule living conditions and the new dictatorship through puns, gestures, and double entendre were particularly popular with his audiences.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And it wasn't too long before his work got the attention of the Nazis, who began to watch his shows very carefully.
I'm sure they did.
It's my understanding that the Gestapo sent like plainclothes agents to his shows to write down literally everything he said by hand, So, I mean, can you imagine somebody taking a typewriter into the club?
I love that.
I'm just here because I'm getting some ideas and taking notes.
Just taking some notes and make funny ha joke later.
I am very inspired by the works of Werner Finck. I am thinking of getting into this myself. I'll let you know when I have some to tell. Oh my God. When is the next open mic?
There is no open mic. Mic is never open. We tell you who gets mic.
There is a room in the back where mic is open 7 nights a week. See, there's the cabaret. Okay. Now, this is when Finck began to use his audience to his aid, often appearing flustered or confused on stage, looking for the right words and allowing the audience to finish his sentences for him. So he didn't really say the things, the people did. So when the people writing all the stuff down could report back to their superiors, he didn't really say it.
It's so awesome.
That's so brilliant.
Yes.
Now, regardless, the work of these jabs at the Nazi regime reached Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels.
Freaking Goebbels, dude.
Goebbels. He had Die Catacomb put under observation in 1934, closed in 1935, and in 1934, Finck, along with several other comedians in the club, they were put into Esterwagen concentration camp for an undetermined sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, like I said, I couldn't find, well, I don't speak German, but
right.
I mean, you go on YouTube and you can find all kinds of acts that he did. I believe most of them were after the war, obviously, because recording something in 1933 was a little difficult.
Yeah.
But I have no idea the content of them, but he seems to be having a good time.
Amen to that. And
right. Now, while in captivity, it's my understanding that Finck would continue his act for incarcerated peoples, doing his best just to keep their spirits up. Mm-hmm. And yes, he would tell the same jokes while in captivity.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
And for all of the people in the camp, it made it worse.
Yes, thank you. I know. I remember. That's why I'm here. But anyway, Finck would later say that while in the club, they would tell their jokes with just a hint of anxiety, knowing that there is a possibility of imprisonment. But once in the camp, he said that they had already been imprisoned, so why not do the same material?
Makes sense to me.
They couldn't be more imprisoned.
Right.
Like, well, there are, turns out, worse fates in those concentration camps, but, you do you.
Yeah.
You do you. Well-known German actor Kathy Dorsch was good friends with German politician Hermann Göring, and through her efforts was able to get Finck and the rest released after only 6 weeks.
Nice.
I mean, that's okay, good.
Yeah.
That's the call from the governor way before the day of execution. But
well, I've seen Indiana Jones. I know that these German temperatures they're capable of all kinds of stuff.
Yes, I will go find the cup of Christ for you. But Finck and his buddies were released under the condition that none of them would work on the stage again for a year after their release. Because apparently it was at a real peak time for the Nazi movement. So they're like, we can't have anybody saying bad stuff. But of course, that didn't stop Finck from performing.
All the world's a stage, man.
That's right. I've heard that somewhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, and he actually started to add film to his resume by this time,
nice.
Which just increased his reach. I don't know that he was doing the same material in film. I think they were just like, this is a popular comedian. Let's put him in this thing, as they do with popular comedians today. They're like, oh, he could be the voice of the dog in the next funny animated movie. It's like, yeah, that's like putting Andrew Dice Clay as like the baby in Boss Baby.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, that was Alec Baldwin. So,
yeah, I mean,
oh. In 1936, Finck was even tried before the Berlin Special Court for his crimes against the state, but he was never sentenced.
Of
I,
course not.
I have no idea why. It just was like, I think it was just like, well, we don't like him. Like, well, what do you do? Just put him in chains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bigger fish to fry at that time. I
Yeah, a
imagine,
little
for the
bit, a
German
little
government.
bit. Yeah, 1936.
Like
But
literally.
this comedian said a few things that 25 people heard.
Yeah.
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 Okay, here's a cutting from Time Magazine, February 13th, 1939. Quote, until last week, a favorite of Berlin's cafe society was twinkly-eyed Werner Finck, one of the daring, politically sophisticated German comedians who got their laughs from the Nazis. Comedian Finck would suddenly interrupt his patter, shoot up his arm in a burlesque Nazi salute, and then adjust a picture. Okay, so it's on this level where a lot of stuff I read said you can never really tell where his jokes were coming from, where they were going.
Right.
And so it would be this guy getting very serious, maybe start goose stepping, throw up the arm, and then itch under his armpit or something like that.
Wild.
Like, that is really funny. Okay, continuing the quote. Last week, the Nazi bigwigs finally caught on, and propaganda minister Goebbels expelled actor Finck, a fellow vaudeville actor, and a comedy team, the Three Rulins, from the Reich's culture chamber as, quote, desecrators of things that are holy to the Nazis. So they had developed this bureau of what art means, and he was expelled from it.
That is so terrifying, because the Nazis are just the political party.
Right. Right. Here's a fun little epilogue to this story that was in Time. I can't wait to see your reaction to this. To prove he has a sense of humor, Minister Goebbels has a news sheet, Der Angriff. The news sheet thereupon began a joke contest. First prize, $40.
That's it. $40.
Okay, $40 in our time, that doesn't seem like much, but I looked it up as we're recording this in September 2025. That's like $932. But that's a national joke contest.
For a G. A national joke contest, you win a G. Horse pucky.
What jokes were sent in? How many Jews does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I don't know. I can't find any. They're all gone somewhere. How
did the communist invest his retirement? Oh, he didn't get one.
My Lord. For all your German listeners, for the dozens of them, we apologize.
Yeah, they're all saying, I'm sorry. We did not do that.
No doubt. No doubt. They have actually a much, much more sort of healthy relationship with their history than we do.
Yeah. One of my very best friends lives in Vienna, and so he's like, yeah, it's considerably calmer.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, Der Angriff, the title of the news sheet literally translates into English as The Attack.
Nice.
Hey, there's a joke contest in this magazine called The Attack. What do you think it's about?
My goodness, man. I love it. I love it.
We will call it The Attack. I used to think that was very funny, like in my youth, when I started learning about, how widespread the antagonism got in 1930s and 1940s Germany, where it's like anything you could say in a German accent, you could sound angry, and people were like, yep, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I was in choir, and I remember coming in, we had to do a Christmas carol in German, and we're learning how to pronounce everything.
Sound of music.
Oh, it was so wonderful. And I remember coming into the class one day, and I opened my sheet music, and the piano plays, and I go, "Lo ist ein Rosenblümlein." Translated, "Lo, how a rose air blooming." Everybody's like, mm-hmm. All right, back to Finck. Now, in order to escape arrest when he's expelled from this arts bureau, Finck volunteered for military efforts and served as a radio operator for several years throughout the war, even being arrested for his crimes against the state and then released again in 1942 because his work was so important to the war effort. I mean, like I said, he's a radio operator. You know, you got to tell the U-boats to go somewhere, right?
Right.
So that, yeah.
My God.
He was eventually captured by U.S. forces while serving on the Italian front and watched the fall of the Third Reich as a POW of the Americans.
Hey, man, worse things could happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I might be behind bars, but I'm watching this whole regime fall that I was making fun of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And throughout the rest of his life, Finck published satirical magazines, continued performing in cabarets and film with the same kind of act that he did, and he died in Munich in 1978.
I love that story.
Isn't that great?
Yes. Yes.
And I get, like I said, you can still go online and find all kinds of performances from Finck and his compatriots doing little goofy songs and little, you know, it's like in between Marx Brothers and Three Stooges, I would say. Gotcha. Somewhere in there, right? I mean, it's just goofy and it's just guys singing and doing silly stuff. Now, my Eumenidites, I could have ended the episode right there, but as I mentioned before the interview began, there was something about this story that kept nipping at my heels, almost begging me to go a little further. So I did, and you'll hear it in just a moment. But while we're stopped, I'll invite you to get a little deeper into the show by following Euripides Eumenides on Instagram at Euripides_Eumenides. Trident Theater also has an Instagram, or you can just reach out to the show by using the Contact Us form at tridenttheater.com. Now that we've had that little chat, let's get back to Jason Kirkmeyer and the rest of this episode, Werner Finck and the Nazis. Now, here's a couple things that Goebbels had to say about comedians like Finck. Quote, "We do not permit ourselves to be ridiculed."
Yeah.
I don't consent. Now, that's not what that means.
These guys don't know what consent means, brother. Don't worry about it.
And here's another one. It's a little bit longer. This one, I'm like, okay, you started strong and then you ended weak. Okay. Quote, "Comedians have no right to be jocular about such things as the Nazi 4-year economic plan or Adolf Hitler's demand for colonies because they are too important and require too much careful thinking on the part of big minds."
Did you just say minds with an E or minds
with
the
D? With the D. Yeah.
Okay.
But, you know, I mean, it might translate different in German. I don't know.
Wait, I imagine not. I imagine. Wow. Either way, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I get like the colonization thing is a little bit, you know, it's tense, but you have a problem with me attacking your 4-year economic plan?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many jokes have been made about NAFTA?
What's that?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's gone. It's a terrible plan. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just the idea of, you know, not giving permission. Nobody asked me if they could make fun of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it is this terrifying understanding of what the First Amendment means. Like,
right.
Speech is free so long as it's unoffensive. And I pay for it and it comes through my cable for $100 a month. Right. And that speech is okay because I pay for it. That speech
is okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and here's, I just started the rehearsal process again. I'm doing, I do an annual production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show every year. Right. And each year we've kind of pushed it just a little bit more, but it's a night for people, in my opinion, in a community that, you know, you have a lot of people with alternative lifestyles who are in a community where traditional values are a little bit more prevalent. And so they have
the diplomat, my friend. You were
isn't
such
that
a
something?
Diplomat.
Right.
I've lived in Wyoming my whole life too. I totally see it.
Yep. I mean, there's something to be said for somebody who just like wants to live a little off the grid and with just a basic life. Like, I remember I was taking a trip between Wyoming towns, and you'd see like a homestead like half a mile off the road. And I'm like, God, we're 35 miles out of town at this point. Can you imagine the life you'd have to live out like that? Like, it's 9:30 at night and you get to the front door of your house after a 45-minute drive and you go, oh shit, I forgot milk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one answer, man, and it's the Wyoming answer.
Mhm.
I guess you don't forget milk.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. Won't do that next time, will you?
No.
That gas costs more than that milk did.
All right. Now, of course, Goebbels had plenty of reasons to go after Finck in the 1930s, but I have to wonder if he had been so fervent in his squashing of the critique of the Nazi movement had it not been for a young man named Horst Wessel. Have you heard of Horst Wessel? No?
I've not heard of Horst.
Here's an abridged version of the Horst Wessel story. Horst Wessel was, God, that's a fun thing to say 47 times on a podcast.
Oh, you damn tootin' it is.
Yeah. Horst Wessel was born in Germany in 1907. Known for being somewhat humorless but bohemian throughout all his life, by the time he reached adulthood, he seemed to have found some purpose. Quote, he fell into the violent radical politics of Weimar Germany as a young man. He rejected moderation, joined the Brown Shirts, and became a street fighter for Adolf Hitler's movement. Okay.
Nice.
And this is one story of thousands that sound almost exactly like this. This is the crazy thing to me. Okay.
God.
Wessel joined the SA, Hitler stormtroopers, He joined them in 1926 and often accompanied or planned raids on areas of Berlin that were known to be populated by Jews, communists, or any Nazi dissenters or critics. On January 14th, 1930, Wessel was shot during one of these raids, and it was suspected that he was shot by a communist sympathizer or a group of communists, depending on what source you read or who's asked. Regardless, Wessel succumbed to his gunshot wound and died at the age of 22 on February 23rd, 1930.
Whoa.
Uh-huh. Goebbels seized upon this and turned the boy's story into legend. Soon Horst Wessel was being praised all over Germany as a heroic patriot. And many Nazis and Nazi sympathizers took his death quite hard, and they believed he died in the service of what was right and what was going to turn the country around. Quote, Nazi propaganda mythologized details of Wessel's death and turned him into the party's most famous martyr. Wessel was celebrated in several propagandistic books, films, and public ceremonies, end quote. You have the funniest face.
I forgive me for being a bit gobsmacked and for, I don't know, man, like, what, my gosh, history might not repeat itself, but it's in the same time signature.
Yep. Okay. Hold on to that thought. I'm going to put a pin in that. We're going to talk about it in just a moment. In his personal files, Wessel had written lyrics to a song meant to praise the Nazi regime, and these lyrics were turned into the Horst Wessel Lied, and the song became the official anthem of the Nazi Party.
Yes, it did.
After World War II ended, the Horst Wessel Lied was outlawed in both Germany and Poland. Yep. And before I go too much further, here I'm going to take the pin out and say, I suppose we have to address how similar this sounds in America, September 2025, and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And here's where I make my statement. What happened to Charlie Kirk is deplorable, in my opinion. While I disagree with a great many things that he said, mainly because there's no way of being able to say that I agree or disagree with everything he said because it wasn't all documented, I think that Charlie Kirk made a very public spectacle of himself, which obviously does draw attention, both positive and negative, but he was no Nazi, and he just said some very provocative things. That's my statement. That's my opinion. Okay? He put himself out there. He said some very, inflammatory or exciting things. Nonetheless, they were passionate. But he died in a way that, not cool. That's all I'm going to say. But for the internet to have a little ripple of excitement because both Kirk and Vessel were killed doing what they set out to do, Vessel participated and organized violence upon his perceived enemies. Kirk hosted events to talk to people. There's a difference.
I agree.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you.
Daniel Siemens, a professor of European history at Newcastle University in England, who wrote a book on the works of Horst Wessel, had this to say about comparing Kirk and Vessel. Quote, "It's a slippery slope. The people that you choose as your heroes should engage in civil discussion and dialogue, and not this mixture of political radicalism that activates violence."
Mm-hmm.
Siemens also suggested that comparing Horst Wessel and Charlie Kirk is a lot like comparing somebody who just spoke a lot to somebody who went out and actually cracked skulls, and kind of subconsciously is suggesting that Nazi martyrdom is an okay thing to think about. There's a big difference between a guy who enacts violence and one who just talks to people with some pretty wild ideas himself. So,
Yes.
Enough on that. Hey, everybody, don't compare these two because one talked a lot and one actually did the job.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk talked a lot.
He talked a lot, and he didn't necessarily inspire. He inspired more talk, more than he inspired violence. And I don't think more talk is necessarily bad.
No.
We can deal with words.
We can deal with words. And I also have to look at it because, it's all over the internet right now. And it took me aback when I saw that he was born in 1993.
Yeah, just a baby.
Really? He was just a baby. And I'm listening to this other podcast on another famous American at a certain, I'm not going to say who, but in a certain point of time was going through this significant, an event that the world focused on, and this person was 22. And I'm like, this person was a child.
Yeah.
Really, the age of childhood should be let's maybe extend it to 30. Because in the 20s, we're still fucking around and finding out.
I don't know. I'm kind of living on the 40s, the new preteen model.
Me too, with my, I finally got my first pair of Air Jordans 5 years ago.
That's awesome.
Fuck yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think for the most part, it seems that we can all agree that based on the things learned throughout the war and the outcome of World War II, the Nazis turned out to be the bad guys.
Fair. It's a good assessment.
But before the war, some cross sections of the American population actually didn't have that bad of an outlook on Nazis.
Huge sections of the American population.
Well,
Huge.
and, perhaps that was because Hitler's full ideology hadn't been made known to the world, much less to his own people. But let's not forget that Hitler was elected in a fully democratic election, and the German people legitimately thought he would save their country.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it worked for Mussolini. He said he'd make the trains run on time. He made the trains run on time. Cool. Yeah. What else he got in mind?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Before the war, I'm going to say two dirty words here. Corporate America examined the rise of fascism in Europe and Hitler's momentum in Germany and considered the Nazi movement to be, quote, the lesser of two evils. And here's a quote I got from a book. After all, if Hitler hated communists as American capitalists did and criminalized their philosophy as some American capitalists did, well, how bad could he be?
Right.
We just see this little man who I read about this. Networks broadcast Hitler's speeches in America.
Yeah.
And people couldn't understand what he was saying. They're just like, wow, that's a very charismatic speaker. He seems to be caring very, very much about everything.
And they were huge in places like Chicago and Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
And I guess newsreels before movies would show all these people listening to his speeches and crying and going, my God, he's going to save us. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the perception of what we saw.
Yeah.
However, many Americans could also smell that something was wrong, and popular comedians took the stage and radio shows to satirize, criticize, and just plain decry the Nazi movement. Comedian Eddie Cantor, who rose to fame in vaudeville and cabaret-style performances, was Jewish himself, and would take to his very popular radio program, The Eddie Cantor Show, to decry any movement that promoted anti-Semitism and saw it rising in the Nazi movement. So in many of his broadcasts in the 1930s, Cantor would plead for his listeners to, quote, join in the fight for civilization and humanity,
Nice.
after he'd said all this funny stuff throughout his show.
Wild.
Right? You know, I mean, honestly, it's kind of like at the end of Price is Right, Bob Barker going, spay and neuter your pets and be good to, or no, like Jerry Springer. After everything you saw on, you know, people ripping hair out and weaves off and throwing chairs and everything, at the end of it, he gives his message and says, be good to yourself and be good to each other.
Right.
You know, what the fuck are you talking about? What did we just watch?
I do think it's interesting that civilization comes before humanity.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting and thoughtful kind of choice, I think I would say.
Right. Yeah. Now, of course, many of these sentiments from Cantor drew the ire of Americans who might have supported the fascist movement for one reason or another. Cantor received death threats at his home and had frequent vocal objectors to his live broadcasts. Even so, Cantor's efforts resulted in considerable media attention, and the attention was like you could just feel it. It was very electric when he would do like a broadcast before a live audience. At one broadcast before a live audience at a theater in Hollywood, Cantor received a fair amount of heckling, obviously. Near the end of the broadcast, a couple began to walk out of the theater once the discussion turned strongly to criticizing Hitler. At the back of the theater, the couple was stopped by a woman asking why they were leaving. The couple said that they were enjoying the broadcast, but, quote, we explained we liked it, but that we didn't want to hear any propaganda against Hitler, end quote. The man was then punched by another comedian who was in the audience who heard the objection.
Nice. I like that.
I mean, that could have been the most innocent of things. Like, you know, I don't want to hear anything negative about the world. We just talk about too many negative things in the world. I don't want to hear any propaganda against Hitler. Smack.
Yeah. I hope his knuckles had like, these machines kill fascists, like tattooed on them in German.
Yeah. Die, Nazi, die written on the knuckles. Now, once the war began, and fascism started to look like more of a problem rather than the lesser of two evils, the U.S. started to understand something of a sense of togetherness, but the entertainment world still seemed divided. It seems that most popular comedians who were the biggest critics of, you know, Nazism and fascism were actually called into the war effort on some level or another, so their voice wasn't heard. They were out doing the job. This left behind a multitude of lower-level performers who relied on derogatory jokes about minorities to keep spirits high.
Did they have a lot of podcasts?
I think it was more like, you know, you had vaudeville stuff, but yes.
Oh, okay. I was just confused.
This would have been the perfect time for podcasts to exist.
Yeah, I just imagine a bunch of low-level, third-rate comedians who end up podcasters supporting some sort of fascist regime. It's crazy.
Oh, I already see it. You know, you've got some guy who has a podcast called Stumbling Through the Dark, and he gets on there. He's like, now let's talk about what the urban youth are doing. And you're like, oh, I get it. Yeah. Okay. Films that promoted togetherness were also accompanied by animated shorts that mock minorities.
Good.
Right?
Good.
And that obviously tugged against the fragile threads of ethnic harmony in America. Right. So, yeah. Animators complained that they were being hamstrung by not being able to use material they used to use. But studio heads won out in making their animators use less racially offensive material, especially when many Americans were, you know, they're like, hey, we're trying to get together, you know, regardless of ethnicity. We're all trying to be like, we know what the enemy is, and it's not here.
Right.
Ish. Right?
Ish.
Yeah. Of course, that didn't stop thousands of Japanese Americans from being detained, but, you know, whatever.
Right.
And you see this kind of thing today. I recently saw a clip on Instagram that I pretty much agreed with. Mark Maron, the comedian, was on Howie Mandel's podcast and pretty much put the screws to Mandel about the fact that for some comedians, the fight for free speech very easily stepped behind the anti-woke movement, championing a version of free speech that simply allows them to be divisive and make derogatory jokes about minorities and use derogatory terms whenever they want to. I mean, it's that whole thing of, well, you can't joke about anything anymore.
Ooh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Marin claims that while this is free speech, it's mainly just an excuse to get empty laughs by using the same old hackneyed material that worked in more divisive times. And if the comedian can't meet the times to create more insightful material, then they're probably not the great comedian that they tout themselves to be. Boom.
Fair enough.
Right?
I really agree with that. I saw that podcast, and he is dead on the money. That these are hacks that have no intellectual curiosity, and they become representations and representatives of a movement that is entirely incurious intellectually. They do not care.
Right. Although I do have to say that new episode of South Park, the opening of the season, they used a lot of those offensive terms against the people who are trying to say, please let us say those things.
Right.
They're like, well, if you want them to be said, okay, we can say them to you too.
Right. Which I thought was a really thoughtful inversion of their speech.
I thought that was so funny.
I mean, it is like sort of fundamental to kind of what you were talking about earlier. The idea of the carnivalesque, like the only way that you can attack authority sometimes is to put on a clown suit and make puppets out of paper and turn it all on its head, like. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, that's been like the best satire on, in mainstream media for the last 25 years.
And it gets to be because it's just paper.
Yeah. It's just paper.
Paper.
And at the end of the day, I would say this, I don't know how you feel about this. I would say without them really coming out and saying it, the creators of South Park have a theme for that entire show, which is humanity takes itself way too goddamn seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really. Once somebody starts to get way too serious about something without being like positively energetic about it, once it's like, dude, a new issue of the like they're relaunching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I can't believe it. That's going to be so exciting.
Again.
And you're like, dude, we've been there, but that guy is really excited and really happy, and that's not hurting anybody. It's when somebody goes, dude, did you see we can say the R word now? Oh, dude, we can say, and you're like, nah. Yeah. So in the end, I think this clipping from an op-ed that comes from the same Independent article I started at the beginning sums up where we might be today, and I think it's a truth that has been present for hundreds of years. In the modern world, comedians who go too far in mocking authoritarian leaders often pay dearly. That they are feared more than rival politicians tells us something more important about power. It cannot be laughed at. But in my opinion, that's also one of the main purposes of comedy, a derivative of stage performance underneath the great umbrella in theater. And that is my story on Werner Finck and the Nazis.
That's a hell of a story, brother.
I mean,
unsurprising though, but like comedy is only useful insofar as it upholds the state, and the humor does not sort of cut down on what the state thinks is good. And the second that humor starts to push or swim against that stream of what the state wants, it's the easiest thing to get cut. That's why you see, like, even now, the Colberts and the Kimmels getting cut out, because you can handle some guy in a suit saying terrible things about you on the news. It's different when people are laughing at you.
Yeah. Hey, do you remember that Cory Booker speech that was just over 24 hours a few months ago?
Yeah.
I barely do.
Well, I remember that he did it. That he did it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And that, like, and the first thing I Googled about it was how he handled his peace situation. That was the first thing I Googled. I didn't Google a thing about what he said.
Yeah. Didn't
Like,
he get
didn't
hungry?
catheterize himself. Did he use like a little, like some sort of magical sort of cup that you would use in space to sort of connect the?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the locking mechanism. And
Man,
that just I don't like.
You,
okay.
I mean, and the amount of pepper you got to put on the tank to get the pressure right so it sticks on.
And I think the theme of it was our leader in power is bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which he could have said in 5 minutes.
Yep.
But the point was not brevity.
No.
The point was we have to shut these people up for a day.
Yeah. And I guess that got accomplished, but then they came back the next day and started talking again. Whereas you have somebody like Colbert or Kimmel who I watched it. I watched the clip, and I'm trying to be as neutral as possible here. He didn't make a joke.
He didn't.
He said, this is what the president said about the assassination, and it looks like he's pretty upset, and he wasn't. He seemed very aloof and like it didn't really matter to him. So I can see how that might have painted the leader in a bad light. But if you can't stand that, maybe there's something to be said about what you were saying at the beginning, that state-sponsored art should be a priority. Because I would say, let's state sponsor somebody like a Kimmel or a Colbert to be the jester that can point out some cracks, and every now and then we can go, oh, you know what, you're right. Or you can say, I see what you're saying there, but I don't think you're looking at this part of it. And that's legitimate. That is like, I hear your criticism, but there's this thing here. And really that's what, in my opinion, that's what democracy is. You're letting the people hear both sides. Somebody explained this to me a long, long time ago about public debates in ancient Greece, where it would be like you'd have a table and there would be kind of the issue on the table. Maybe they'd have a manifestation in some form, like should we continue to eat chickens or something like that? I don't know. And you need to have one guy for and one guy against. And there was something of a format of the guy for it would come up and make his speech. And then the guy against it would listen to all of that and come up and give his rebuttal. And then they'd say, okay, against, present your case. And so against would come up and present his case. And then they'd have, I think, maybe 2 or 3 more rounds of rebuttal. And at the end of it, the crowd gets to pick.
Right.
And I'm like, that's majority. That's 2 people of.
It depends, though.
Yeah.
Because even when you think about ancient Greece, you have to ask yourself, who's the crowd that's picking?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that is the question that has been at the center of democracy from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Who gets to do the picking?
Right.
And I think that one of the things that comedy represents manifestly that you don't see in other artistic productions is that when you see the support of all of the people behind the comedian, that's the real democracy.
Right.
It isn't about them hustling the electoral college. It isn't about them hustling state delegates or taking advantage of the fact that people aren't coming to vote. Comedy is the ultimate democracy. If things are funny, they're funny.
Right.
And I think that tyrants from the beginning of time struggle against that because they have nothing to say against it. There's nothing you can say when people are mocking you. The only thing you can do is shut up, because if you say something, they'll mock you more.
Yeah.
And so it shuts up their discourse in this frustrating way.
I don't know. Maybe the best that they can do at that point is go, yeah, okay, I hear you. Yep, that does sound like me. But, to a degree, it's like, yeah, but you're saying that about things that are affecting millions of people. I don't know that you can be that flip about it. There's one other fact that I think I'll kind of close this out with that I've always always kind of pondered over. And I realized that it's not 1000% a great way of gauging how people respond to things that are going on in this country. I just think it's interesting. I think it was in the 2004 presidential election, way fewer people came out to vote for the presidential election than they did for American Idol.
I didn't see that.
I'm serious.
Oh.
And I think, there are things you can say like, well, you could vote as many times as you want to for American Idol. But I'm like, yeah, but it was the number of people.
Yeah.
Like there were significantly more people
Yeah.
who were more interested in whether or not this singer or that singer was going to go on to the next round than who was going to lead the country. That's what spoke more to their hearts. I think because the arts moved their hearts. Whereas these politicians just talk policy.
That's interesting. And I think that's the most positive way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people got really, really, really excited about John Kerry and the Swift boats. But as I'm bringing it up now, I am hearing a lot of my listeners across the world go, oh, yeah, that did happen.
Yeah.
But they might be able to tell you who won American Idol in 2004.
You're probably right. You're probably right. But I think that's also the purpose of our democracy and the way that our founders created it. Mm-hmm. They created it so that the bulk of America, who was disaffected and untouched by the means of production, they were just underneath the means of production, digging it out of the ground.
Right. Please let me have a say in something.
America was never supposed to have this big of a voice. It never was.
Yeah.
And so what we see is a system that is often about diminishing the vote and diminishing how many people come out to vote.
Yeah.
And when more people come out to vote, you have all of the fears of democracy from the beginning of it. Which is, oh my God, who's going to vote? Who's going to be allowed to vote? Can these people who, what, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I mean, it just...
Yeah, fill in the blank, really, at that point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's wild. But I'm grateful we have our comedians.
Indeed.
For the time being.
Amen. The good ones that aren't fascists.
Well, hey, comedy is alive and well.
It's alive. It'll never die.
There it is.
It'll never die. Man, like there are two masks. Mm-hmm. One of them's crying and one of them's laughing. Right. And that's forever.
That's right.
Like that's the genre. That's the art.
Theater's been dying for 2,500 years and hasn't expired yet. At least that's what people say.
Keeps reinventing itself, finding new ways, man.
And hallelujah.
Yeah.
And with that, there's not too much more to be said. I'm certainly glad that, for the time being, the good comics are still somewhat speaking truth to power, especially at a time when that power can't seem to take a joke. It's happened before in history, and I'm certain it's going to happen again. I'd like to thank Jason Kirkmeyer for his insightful and hilarious perspective on this episode, and I'd love to have him back for some more humorous and introspective discussion. But for now, I'll sign off. This has been another episode of Euripides Eumenides, a theater history podcast, and I have been your host, Aaron Odom. Another episode will be in your ears in a fortnight, and I will see you at intermission.